Well, hi, I'm Doug Thompson. Welcome to Stories That Matter with my special guest, Robyn Chambers, and she's the Executive Director in Focus on the Family in Colorado Springs. And Robyn, tell me a little about yourself.
Doug, thank you so much for having me. As you said, I work at Focus on the Family. I've been there for a very, very long time, but I currently work as the Executive Director of Advocacy for Children. And that's a mouthful, that's a big title. And what it means is we stand up for children and those who can't speak for themselves every day. We do a lot of work in the foster care and adoption arena, but then we also work in a lot of pro-life pregnancy centers and sanctity of human life. Every single day, we work with pregnancy centers across the United States, helping them to get an ultrasound machine or nurses trainings, anything that could really help them advocate for life.
Hey, do you, in that capacity, get opportunities to visit with young women who are usually a single woman and they're stressed because I'm having a child, I didn't plan on this, the boyfriend is not involved, and my family's feeling that stress and on and on. Do you work in that setting too?
Occasionally I will. I've been in more pregnancy centers than I probably could even remember or count. And occasionally I do get an opportunity to sit down with a young woman who was a client, and their stories are heartbreaking at times, but then there's also a story of redemption and healing because of what the pregnancy center has done. And they'll say, they come in because they're scared. They're in a situation that feels very out of control. They're in an unplanned pregnancy, and like you said, they have been told they don't have support. My mom and dad may be going, yeah, we're not doing this, we're kicking you out. Or father, the baby is saying, I'm going to break up with you if you don't take care of this, if you don't have the abortion. And she comes to a place like a pregnancy center, and there's immediate warmth, there's safety, she's treated with dignity and respect. And they talk through all of those fears with her and tell her, you can do this, and we're here to support you. And then that young woman changes her heart and her mind and chooses to keep the baby because she knows that there is support. And it is, for me, it is a boost every time I hear that, because then I know we're doing the right thing.
I'm going to guess, Robyn, that over the 25 years that you served, and I realize it's always hasn't been in that same position that you are now, but I bet there's a lot of stories of young women that you've counseled, and they've given birth, and some number of years have gone by, and you get to see that child. You get to see how that family has now developed again because she's maybe married to somebody, and the father has adopted, or the husband has adopted the child. You have stories like that too?
We do. One of my favorites is a young woman who had actually made an abortion decision. She had made an appointment at an abortion provider. She and her boyfriend at the time were in college, and she said, "Robyn, I was the good girl and never thought this would happen to me." And then panicked, like a lot of these women do, thinking, I'm going to disappoint my family. We're in college, we can't afford this baby. And so she and her boyfriend at the time made the decision to abort and made an appointment at a Planned Parenthood. Of course, he could not go back with her, and she actually was on the table in the abortion room and had a panic attack and started crying. And the nurse, and she said, Robyn, that's what's so amazing about this story, is this nurse is working in this abortion clinic, and the nurse said, you're not ready for this. This is not the decision you need to make, and actually escorted her back out. And she said when she told her boyfriend, I couldn't do this, he was so relieved. He said, I've been praying the whole time I've been sitting out here. And that young man is 22 and just got married and just graduated from ORU, or Robson University, and is now a writer for us. And so I've met him, and he's this godly, amazing man on fire for the Lord. And think about how different his life or her life would have been had she made a different decision. And now I get to meet Jess, and he is one of our biggest advocates for life. And he says, I'm here because my mom chose life.
Wow.
And it gives me chills every time I talk with him and I hear his story. He wants to be a youth pastor. So think of the impact that he's going to have in young people's lives.
Yeah, that's an awesome story. And, I was listening to a program recently, and maybe we had done a program on some of this area with the Planned Parenthood and some of the people that used to work there, and the stress that they go through once they begin to look at the ultrasound. And up until then, why I didn't realize. I thought it was just a glob. And then when you see it on the ultrasound, and it's, oh my goodness. And then they got into the alcohol and the stress, and they couldn't wait to get out of that setting. And I see lots of people, because I'm a judge and an attorney, I see lots of what I would call kids now, because I'm an old guy, but I see lots of kids who are now having, they've had the child, and they can't raise the child, and the child's in the foster program. And those numbers are a lot larger now than they were 20, 30 years ago, and I've been at this for 40 years. So over those years, I see the numbers just continuing to grow. But what an amazing thing it is to be able to place a child that, just lost in the system and finds a family. And that's what you do, isn't it?
Yes, that is another big piece of my heart that I get to do every day. My husband and I actually adopted our 2 grandchildren, and we got that call, Doug. We got the call from DHS saying, you have 15 minutes to decide. Do you want your grandchildren, or we're removing them from the home and they're going into foster care? There's no hesitation at all. Of course, we wanted our grandchildren, and they have been just the joy of our lives. And so knowing how that impacted my family is one of the reasons I'm so passionate about the foster care system. And what we do at Focus on the Family is we come into communities and we work with probably folks like you, work with local churches and child placement agencies, and really draw attention to the children in that community. And like you said, the numbers are large and they're overwhelming at times. And so what we want to do is raise awareness of the children in a specific region or a specific community. That feels a little more doable. That feels like you can kind of get your head wrapped around that. And then we talk about how those children are desperate for a forever family. And we work through the church, because we know that scripture just talks about taking care of the orphan, and that's what we're called to do. And so we raise awareness of the need in the community, and then we start those families on that process of becoming a foster parent or adopting from foster care, or even if we feel like God's not calling them to foster. And we've had people say that, well, God's not calling me to foster, God's not calling me to adopt. But we can say, well, what is God calling you to do? And a lot of times it's, well, God's calling me to provide respite for that family, or God's calling me to provide a meal once a week, or I'm going to go to the grocery store for you. And that's what we talk through with that community, is everyone is called to do something. And then we open those floodgates and let people be a part of a solution of finding forever families. And right now the need is very, very great. With the pandemic and everything, we've seen a lot of children have ended up in the foster care system, and those numbers have grown. So we desperately need families to step up and provide that care.
And you've been with Focus on the Family now for a quarter of a century. So, of course, when you started, Dr. James Dobson was the president of the organization at the time. Did you work regularly with Dr. James?
I did not. I actually was in our global ministries department, and I'm kind of the nerd. I did all of our contracts for copyright and trademark, and getting Dr. Dobson's books translated into other languages. And so I didn't have a lot of direct interaction with him. But at the time that I was in that department, Jim Daly was our vice president. And so I worked really closely with Jim, and now Jim is our president. And it has been fun to watch him grow into this. And he is so passionate about foster care, because he was one of those kids that he was in foster care after his mother passed away. And so this is something near and dear to his heart. He's very, very passionate about pro-life, and speaks regularly on the need for foster parents, the need for parents to adopt from foster care, but then also speaks very passionately about life and how important it is to protect that life. And so he's one of my favorites at Focus, because I just know his heart, and it's right where what we're talking about today, that's where his heart is.
Well, and people can certainly appreciate the fact when you say, I'm working with foster kids, we're trying to make a positive difference. And there's the president of the organization, Jim Daly, who I was a foster child. I was one of those that cried when I lost my mother. I had nobody. I had nowhere else to go. I couldn't go out on my own, obviously. And then they have a story, and they share that story. And so that compassion is very clear as he talks about it. I've heard him speak about it. It's very clear, Robyn, as I visit with you. Your heart is on fire for these kids.
They are, because I can't imagine what would happen to my grandchildren had they ended up in foster care. And Doug, I can tell you, we had the joy of leading both of them to Christ. And, would that have happened had they been in a foster care situation? Maybe. But now I know. And our granddaughter is a sophomore in college, and I cannot wait to see what that young woman does. And our grandson is a senior in high school this year, ready for football to start. And they are just amazing young people and have overcome a lot. But they know it's because of who they are in Christ that they can overcome.
Now, I know that Focus on the Family has lots of programs that they're involved in. Can you kind of highlight some of those programs? I know they may not be ones that you're involved in right now, but you may be familiar with them. Can you kind of highlight some of those for the viewers?
Absolutely, and one that I'm most familiar with, because it was part of our team for a little space of time, is Raising Highly Capable Kids. Probably one of the best programs that Focus has had as far as reaching into an underserved community. The director for that is Mike Haley, and Mike goes into communities where there's a lot of poverty, and a lot of these parents have never had it modeled. What does it mean to be a good parent? And so we have worked with the Search Institute, which is kind of a objective third party, that really started looking at what it takes for a child to be successful. And success is defined as graduating from high school, going on to college, or graduating from high school and getting a trade of some kind, being productive, and not being involved in at-risk behaviors, drugs and alcohol, like you were mentioning earlier. And so Mike goes in and works with public schools, and they invite him in, and we do parents groups, and we actually train these parents on the 40 developmental assets. And the more assets those child has in their lives, the more the greater chance of them being successful. And so Mike has done an amazing job. We see illiteracy rates decrease. We see kids graduating. We see kids going on to college or going on to a trade school. And we just see positive. And we have parents that said, I never knew how important it was to sit down and have a meal with my child, to sit down and read with them and help them with homework, things that we take for granted. But if you've been raised in a home where that wasn't modeled, you don't know that those are the key pieces to having your kids be successful. So that's one that I am very passionate about, and Mike's done a great job. The other is Hope Restored. That's part of our marriage department. Dr. Greg Smalley is the vice president. You're probably familiar with his dad, Gary, but Greg took over kind of a marriage retreat center in Branson, Missouri. And from Greg's, just his passion and his heart for seeing marriages restored, we now have a location in Georgia. We have a location in Michigan, and 80% of the couples who go through those marriage retreats, 5 years after, they're still married. So we know that marriages are being saved. And what does that mean? Kiddos are being raised in a home with a mom and a dad, and those children that are then successful. And then the parenting side, soon-to-be Dr. Danny Huerta is the vice president of that department, and he works tirelessly to talk to parents on how they can connect with their children. One of the neatest things we've done recently is he did an entire curriculum on preventing teen suicide. And here in El Paso County in Colorado, we have one of the highest rates of teen suicide in the US. And so he's very passionate about protecting teenagers, really being deliberate about connecting with youth pastors and teachers and parents on how to recognize those signs. So we are here to strengthen families, to strengthen marriages, to save lives. And I can't speak highly enough about my colleagues. They are just as passionate about what they do as I am. And that comes from the top. It comes from that passion from Jim.
Well, Robyn, I appreciate you taking time to visit with us today, and it's absolutely fantastic to see what's going on. Love the work that Jim Daly, the whole staff, is doing at Colorado Springs, because it's a worldwide. We're putting the contact information, of course, will be up on the screen for those who want to contribute to it, that may have questions and other things, and they say, well, I was a foster child, or I'm thinking about adopting one, and they may want to just get some inside information from you. Robyn, thank you so much for taking time to visit with us.
Doug, thank you so much for having me on, and we couldn't do what we do without folks like you, so thank you for partnering with us. We appreciate it.
Thank you. That's awesome. Robyn, you take care. God bless you.
Thank you.